As I'm sure you've read the title, this video is going to be about angles, specifically angles for writing. But what I'm going to do is show you from like a film perspective how angle makes a difference, and then compare that to writing angles. Okay, so like 5 years ago, if you would have asked me what an angle was, I would have been like, oh, well, it's, you know, how many degrees different two lines are. It would have been like, it's either like an obtuse angle, it's an acute angle, it's a right angle. My answers would have been purely math-based. I worked with drafting and design programs, I worked on FTC robots, and basically, no matter what it was, angles was always a mechanical thing to me. They were always math. When it came to like photography, my mom was like super into photography, and I like blatantly told her that like it was just a pointless hobby. Like there's no point, like there's nothing that's gonna come out of it. Like I didn't understand the point for doing photography. And when it came to like movies, it was like I would watch a movie and it'd be like, oh, there's some cool action scenes there, and then it was like that was it. Like there was that and the story. Those are the only two things I cared about. I didn't care about cinematography, I didn't care what was in the shots, I didn't care how the story was told, I just cared about what the story was. And if you asked me like, what's the angle of this film? Then I would have like specifically told you, oh, well, like the camera's above the actors and it's like tilted down. Then about 5 months ago, I started vlogging, and I started thinking about like where I could place the camera. I would like watch other vloggers, I would look at films, and I would like think about it from like a B-roll perspective, or like where you could physically place a camera to make it have a cool effect. But I didn't necessarily know what effect I was looking for. I just knew that if I put my camera on a desk, then it's from the perspective of my desk, like just small things like that. And every single time that I set up my camera, I always wanted to capture as much as I could. There was never like focusing on like one small detail. It was always like, I want the whole thing. So if I was like taking a video recording of like a classroom, I would take the entire classroom. I would stand as far back as I could and try to capture just to show how many people were there. When I didn't realize that at the time, I could actually be focusing on smaller details to help you like really tell that story. So I watched a bunch of TED Talks on like storytelling, because I knew the trick to videos was making sure that I had a good story, and I just didn't know how to tell that story. So I like watched those TED Talks, I ended up taking notes on them, and I never really realized how big of a deal the angle was, and that's like what this video is about, because I'm being meta. But every single time that I saw a story, I thought about it from like a linear perspective. It wasn't like there's point A that happens, point B that happens, point C that happens, and I would look at the order of how they did it, and then look at different stories and how each of those had their own specific order. It wasn't like what perspective it was looking from, it was just purely linear, like ABC. If you would have asked me what was the angle of the film, at the time I would have like told you like where the camera was physically placed. Like I would be like, oh, well, it's placed in the corner of the room. I could kind of tell you like what was going on, but I couldn't tell you like why they were doing it. As of 5 weeks ago, my perception of the word angle has changed again. It still has its whole like math meaning, it still has its like, you know, what physical location the camera is, but it's more than that now. What an angle is to me is it's basically the door that opens up the story. Classroom's busy, or I could focus on every single pencil and like give you basically anxiety, because you'd be thinking about 50 pencils all moving, and then you just feel like you're taking a test, and then you just go down that spiral. But that's what makes a story different than the facts. Is I can share the facts, which is just the general, like, this is a classroom, there's a lot of people, they're all taking this test. Or I could decide what I want to focus on, and what I want to focus on is what angle I am taking. So there's an article I read, and it was Writing 201, what is your angle? In it, the article, it had a single line that like stood out to me, and it was that anybody can tell you the facts, the who, why, what, when, where, and how. Anyone can tell you that the classroom is filled with students, but not everyone's going to tell you the same way. So some people can like if I just wanted to tell you that there was a classroom full of students, I could again take that video and I could just show you there's like 50 students taking a test. Another one could be like from the perspective of like looking top down to the test, and that would show you significance in that test, and my angle would be the test. Everything would be focused on the test versus focusing on the students and being concerned with the students. Or it could be about the pencils, and I could be talking about why it's a waste for people to be doing all these physical tests, and these pencils are just being wasted, and landfills are a thing, and then go on to this environmental. So there are facts, which are who, why, what, when, where, how, when. I said when twice, but whatever. And then there are stories, and the stories need an angle in order for it to actually be a story. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of facts. What I've done is I just walked to campus, I walked down Monroe, and any single time like I stood somewhere and I was like, this is a really nice scene. Like either there's like a lot of flowers here, I feel like it's in bloom, it really shares that spring feeling to it, or it's on Monroe, feels busy, shows that Monroe is a busy place, it's in the library or the MU, those are busy places, and I want to show those busy areas. What I've done is I went out and I took footage of just those areas. Now these clips are just the facts. There's no story between them. It's just showing you what's there. It's not supposed to invoke feeling because they're just facts. It's not the story. Now, if I really wanted to put an angle to this, it's a lot easier to show from a film perspective than it is from like a writing perspective. And the reason that is because you can see the difference in film. So what I did was, after I got the general vibe, I went and I took smaller clips, just trying to really get that vibe and really, tie it all together and make it actually feel like Monroe's busy, not just like show you that there are people walking and there are cars going, but actually put you in the moment. And that's where angle comes in for how you're going to make someone intrigued by your facts and how you're going to make a story out of it. Now I can tell you from like a writing perspective. The who would be my older sibling and I. The what would be that she chased me around the house with knives. The why was because she wanted to scare me and show that she had more power, I guess. When this happened was during my first grade year. Where it happened was in Colorado. And how it happened was because she took advantage while she was babysitting me. Now I can tell you the facts in a simple sentence. I could be like, while I was in first grade, I lived in Colorado, and my older sibling used to chase me around the house with knives while she babysat me. I don't feel like that's a story that everybody can say. I don't feel like that's a sentence that people can say honestly. But it's just facts. Like, there's no twisted, there's no like what did that mean to you? It's just a statement, it's facts, there's nothing else to it. There's no twist, there's no angle. And yeah, it's going to capture someone's attention because that's not something you get to hear every day. But it's also not something that has any angle to it. I could take multiple angles from this. The angle I decided to take from it was trust. In first grade, while I lived in Colorado, I always trusted my mother like any child would. Family was everything to me. It was the only constant in my life. My sister was just as involved in my upbringing. Since my mother was working full-time as a single parent, my sister often babysat me and taught me important life lessons that have stuck with me to this day. One of those lessons is that smaller knives are sharper than bigger knives. She had a lot of hot and cold moments. Sometimes she picked on me, sometimes she helped me with my homework. For this reason, I didn't like her babysitting me because I didn't know what was going to happen. She was making me lunch one day after Mom left to run errands. She was holding a knife in her hand after cutting a tomato, and she turned and glared at me and said no words. She then ran towards me with the knife, yelling. What she said, I do not remember. What I do remember is that I had to go on the defensive, and I ended up grabbing a bigger knife than she had, hoping that it would protect me. This was not the first time I had to protect myself from her. Smaller knives are sharper than bigger knives, she said. Applying my first grade logic and my family trust, I believed her. So I sprinted into the living room, jumped into the corner behind the couch, and began to cry. That's when my mom walked in and finally caught her in the act. Our mom now understood why I didn't like to be babysat by her. That lesson was important to me. It introduced me to survival of the fittest at a young age. It taught me when it was appropriate to cry. It gave me a fresh perspective on the unfaltering trust that I had for family and friends. But most importantly, it taught me that smaller knives are bigger than sharper knives. So when I use the angle of trust, my story is no longer about my sister chasing me around the house with knives. That's not what's important in my story. What's important in my story is that there were trust issues that ended up developing because of that situation, and times that I had to second guess the trust that I had in my family. So that's what applying an angle can do to facts, is it turns it into a story, and it actually unravels what the story is supposed to mean. I decided to use trust as mine, but I could have used survival of the fittest. I could have used, I could have been talking about knives and just like my experiences with knives, and then it would have no longer been a story about my sister chasing me with knives, but it would have been of how I was introduced to knives at a young age. And that's how my set of facts have been twisted into a story. So I feel like I've given two pretty concrete examples of what an angle can do for a story, or what it can do from even a film perspective. This was a pretty long video, but it's like longer than regular videos that I make. But I feel like there was a lot of information that was in it, so it was good. But yeah, that is about all that I have today. So, bye-bye. But before I go, there's a cat. I have a cat. His name's Uno.